The summer of 1985 shimmered over the Blackwood Pines of Oregon, a dense, whispering forest known for its ancient towering trees and a local history whispered with tales of strange disappearances. Tucked deep within this serene wilderness lay a small, seemingly peaceful cabin community, a haven for those seeking solace away from the world. No one anticipated the horror that would soon shatter its tranquil facade. Eleanor Vance, a single mother desperate to escape a troubled past, had sought refuge in one of these cabins. With her, she brought her two children, Lily, 12, with eyes that saw too much, and Ethan, 9, a bright, curious boy. That fateful weekend, Lily's best friend Jessica had joined them for a sleepover, filling the small cabin with innocent laughter. They had come seeking peace, a new beginning, but instead they found a terror beyond comprehension. The horror unfolded on a Saturday morning. Old Man Hemlock, a reclusive neighbor known for his deep knowledge of the forest and his uncanny sense for its moods, felt a profound disturbance. The usual morning chorus of birds was unnaturally silent. A stillness, heavy and foreboding, hung in the air. His gut, honed by decades in the wilderness, screamed that something was profoundly wrong at the Vance cabin. He made his way through the dew-kissed pines, his senses on high alert. The cabin door stood ajar. The silence within was absolute, a stark contrast to the lively sounds usually emanating from it. What Old Man Hemlock discovered inside would forever scar the quiet community. The cabin was a chaotic, blood-soaked tableau. Furniture was overturned, lamps shattered, and scattered toys lay amidst a horrific scene of unspeakable violence. Eleanor, Lily, and Jessica were found brutally assaulted, some tied with ropes, suggesting a prolonged, torturous event had occurred. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood, mixed with something else, something acrid and strange. Most disturbing of all, painted crudely in dark, congealed blood on a prominent wall, was a single, unsettling symbol, a large, inverted triangle, its apex pointing downwards. But the horror didn't end there. As Sheriff Ben Carter, a veteran lawman whose face was a roadmap of past failures and regrets, surveyed the scene, a cold dread settled in his bones. The sheer barbarity of the murders was inexplicable, a level of primal violence he hadn't witnessed in his career. His gaze swept the room, searching, counting heads. 3 bodies. But there were 4 people in the cabin. Ethan, the youngest child, was missing. The silence of the forest outside suddenly felt less peaceful and more like a vast, terrifying maw. The search for answers, and for Ethan, had just begun, spiraling into the dark heart of the Blackwood Pines. The sun rose higher over Blackwood Pines, but its warmth offered no comfort. The horrifying discovery at the Vance cabin sent shockwaves through the small Oregon community, followed by a frenzied, desperate search for 9-year-old Ethan. Every available deputy, every local volunteer, and search and rescue teams descended upon the dense forest, their calls echoing through the whispering trees. But the wilderness offered no answers, no footprints, no discarded clothing, no trace of the boy. The media, quick to descend like vultures, sensationalized the missing child, turning Ethan's disappearance into a national tragedy, fueling the panic that now gripped the region. Amidst the chaos, a miracle, albeit a chilling one, was found. Tucked away, hidden deep within a narrow crawl space beneath the cabin floor, was Sarah, a 3rd child who had been staying over but somehow managed to evade the massacre. Physically unharmed, her eyes were wide, unblinking, reflecting a terror that no human words could possibly convey. She was in a profound state of catatonic shock. She couldn't speak. She couldn't draw. She couldn't even make eye contact. Sarah was a chilling, living testament to the horror, a mute witness to unspeakable acts, her silence more deafening than any scream. Sheriff Ben Carter's forensics team struggled. The scene was chaotic in its brutality, yet eerily clean in others. There was no forced entry, suggesting the victims knew their attackers, or the killer possessed an unnerving stealth. No clear murder weapon was found. The blood was everywhere, yet strangely no large pools, almost as if carefully managed. DNA technology in 1985 was rudimentary, offering little help beyond blood typing. The only consistent, tangible pieces of evidence were the bizarre, blood-painted inverted triangle on the wall and a single, foreign, black feather found clutched tightly in Jessica's lifeless hand, a feather unlike any bird known to inhabit the Blackwood Pines. It felt less like evidence and more like a sign. As the days bled into weeks and Ethan remained missing, fear in Willow Creek gave way to desperate speculation. Locals, many of whom had lived in the shadow of Blackwood Pines for generations, began to whisper. They spoke of Old Man Hemlock's strange knowledge of the forest, his cryptic warnings about certain thin places or sacred groves deep within the woods that no sane person should venture into. They recalled ancient tales passed down through the decades, unsettling stories of strange rituals performed in hidden clearings, of offerings made to unseen entities, and of disappearances that the police simply wrote off as lost in the wilderness. Sheriff Carter, a man of logic and law, initially dismissed these as folklore, the ramblings of the superstitious. But as every conventional lead evaporated, and the silence of Sarah, the mute witness, persisted, the bizarre evidence of the inverted triangle and the black feather began to gnaw at him. He found himself replaying Old Man Hemlock's muttered warnings, searching for answers in the whispers of the woods that logic couldn't explain. The Blackwood Pines, once a refuge, now felt like a living, breathing entity, hiding secrets far older and darker than any crime he had ever encountered. The hunt for Ethan and the truth behind the massacre was slowly pulling Sheriff Carter into the realm of the truly inexplicable. Driven by the relentless silence of Sarah and the mounting despair over Ethan's disappearance, Sheriff Ben Carter found himself reluctantly delving into the very folklore he once dismissed. His first step was to scrutinize the cabin itself, hoping its history might reveal a forgotten truth. What he uncovered sent a shiver down his spine. The Vance cabin, it turned out, had a dark past. In the early 1960s, a previous family who lived there, the Millers, had vanished without a trace, their disappearance officially logged as a missing persons case that eventually went cold. There were whispers then, too, of strange lights in the woods, of unsettling sounds, but nothing concrete. The cabin, it seemed, held a lingering, oppressive atmosphere, as if the very walls remembered screams. Desperate, and with every conventional lead exhausted, Sheriff Carter swallowed his pride and sought out Old Man Hemlock. The old man, perched on his porch, surrounded by the silence of the pines, listened patiently as Carter recounted the horrors of the cabin. When Carter spoke of the inverted triangle symbol and the black feather, Hemlock's weathered eyes darkened. His voice, a gravelly whisper, began to weave a chilling tale. Hemlock spoke of a secretive, ancient cult known locally as the Veiled Order. They believed the Blackwood Pines was more than just a forest. It held a gateway to a darker realm, a place where the veil between worlds thinned. He spoke of rituals, not of worship, but of offerings or transfers of vital energy, performed under specific celestial alignments to gain dark power or to simply open the way. The inverted triangle, he explained, was their sacred mark, a symbol of descent, of passage between realms. And the black feathers? Signs of their presence, Hemlock rasped, left by those who come and go from the dark side of the gateway. He warned Carter that the order wasn't just a legend, they were real, and they had always been watching, waiting for the right moment. Meanwhile, Dr. Emily Hayes, the child psychologist working with Sarah, the mute survivor, made a tentative breakthrough. Under gentle, persistent hypnotic therapy, Sarah didn't speak, but her small, trembling hands began to move, furiously drawing. Her drawings were not of human figures, but of twisted, shadow-like forms emerging from the ancient trees, their limbs contorted, their eyes glowing faintly. The inverted triangle symbol was repeated endlessly across her paper, scrawled almost compulsively. Then, the most chilling image of all, she drew Ethan, being led away by a figure draped entirely in shadows, deep into the heart of the woods, towards a place with ancient, oddly shaped rocks, a place that Old Man Hemlock had always warned people to avoid. As the investigation spiraled deeper into the bizarre, a grim revelation emerged. Sheriff Carter discovered that Eleanor Vance, haunted by a past she couldn't outrun, had sought refuge in Blackwood Pines, precisely because she believed its isolation would protect her from troubles in California. She had been an unwitting witness in a previous, unexplained disappearance case there, a case that also featured strange symbols and an unsettling sense of an unseen force at play. A specific name from that old California file resurfaced, sending a jolt through Carter: Elias Thorne. the same name that Old Man Hemlock had vaguely referenced as a figure drawn to the gateway's call. The threads of destiny, it seemed, were far more intertwined and sinister than anyone could have imagined. The Blackwood Pines held secrets, and they were finally beginning to whisper. The threads of fate, woven with ancient cults and chilling disappearances, tightened around Sheriff Ben Carter. With Old Man Hemlock's cryptic warnings and Sarah's terrifying drawings, the fragmented pieces of the puzzle began to form a horrifying image. Thorn and Hemlock, combining Sarah's unsettling illustrations with faded, ancient maps of the region and obscure local lore, finally pinpointed the gateway, a naturally occurring cave system, concealed behind a massive, ancient stone circle hidden deep within the oldest, darkest part of Blackwood Pines. This was the place Hemlock had always warned about, a place where the air grew heavy and the trees seemed to lean in, listening. The true, horrifying purpose of the Whispering Pines massacre became chillingly clear. The murders in the cabin were not just random acts of violence. They were a preparatory ritual, a purification or cleansing of the space, a symbolic act to ready the victims for their role. And Ethan, the youngest, the most innocent, was taken alive for a far more sinister purpose. He was intended as the key component in a dark ritual, a vessel or sacrifice needed to fully open the gateway, to truly breach the veil between worlds. The blood-painted inverted triangle in the cabin wasn't just a mark. It represented this very passage, the descent into the other side, and the malevolent force pulling the strings. Evidence mounted, pointing to the veiled order being reactivated, drawn by a specific celestial event, a rare lunar alignment that was only hours away, visible only from this secluded part of the forest. The killer wasn't just a lone maniac driven by some personal vendetta. He was a devout, fanatical follower, possibly even the shadowy leader of this resurrected cult, orchestrating a ceremony passed down through generations. He believed in the power of the gateway and the promises it held. Sheriff Carter, a man of logic, now forced to confront the illogical, understood the terrible stakes. With time running out, he assembled a small, desperate team. Guided by Old Man Hemlock, who knew every twisted path and hidden hollow of the ancient woods, and armed with Sarah's chilling, prophetic drawings, they plunged into the heart of Blackwood Pines. The forest, usually just a collection of trees, now felt like a living entity, its deep shadows concealing unseen eyes. The air grew colder, heavier, charged with an unnatural energy as they approached the ancient stone circle. Then, through the oppressive silence, they heard it, faint, guttural chanting, echoing through the ancient trees, growing louder, more frantic with every step. The sound was alien, primal, raising the hairs on the back of Carter's neck. They were racing against the clock, against a darkness that had waited for decades, perhaps centuries, to manifest. Ethan's life hung in the balance, a desperate game playing out against a backdrop of ancient evil and the looming gateway to dread. The ritual was moments from completion. Sheriff Ben Carter and his small, desperate team burst into the clearing. The scene was ripped from a nightmare. Shadowy figures, draped in dark robes, stood illuminated by flickering torchlight around the ancient stone circle. At its center, bound and terrified, was Ethan, his small form a stark contrast to the ominous figures. A robed leader, holding a crude obsidian dagger, stood over him, chanting in a guttural, inhuman tongue. The air crackled with an otherworldly energy, and the inverted triangle symbol, carved into the central stone, pulsed with a faint, malevolent light. Carter's team moved like a desperate wave. The cultists, caught off guard, scattered into the forest's depths, almost dissolving into the swirling mist that had suddenly descended upon the clearing. Their leader, a tall, gaunt figure whose face was obscured by the shadows of his hood, made a chilling, guttural statement before melting away into the ancient trees. The gateway is merely quiet. The offering merely paused. The path is set. He vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the cold echo of his words and the lingering scent of ozone. They found Ethan, barely alive, shivering uncontrollably. He was traumatized beyond words, his eyes vacant, haunted by horrors no child should ever witness. They had saved him, but at what cost? The cultists were never caught. Their identities remained shrouded in the mists of Blackwood Pines, their faces unknown, their numbers a terrifying mystery. The inverted triangle, Oregon's most unholy offering, as the media eventually dubbed it, became an official unsolved case, forever shrouded in local legend and terrifying speculation. The sheer brutality, combined with the inexplicable cult elements, left a chilling void in the hearts of those who knew the truth. Sarah, the young survivor from the cabin, eventually recovered physically, but she was forever marked by the trauma. She rarely spoke, but occasionally, in moments of quiet contemplation, she would compulsively draw the inverted triangle symbol. Sometimes she would speak in unsettling whispers about shadows that danced between the trees and a voice in the pines that promised terrible things. Her words, though fragmented, hinted that she witnessed something truly beyond human comprehension, something that had left an indelible mark on her very soul. Old Man Hemlock remained at his secluded cabin, a silent guardian of Blackwood Pines. His warnings about the whispering trees and the thin places in the forest were no longer dismissed as ramblings. They were understood with a chilling clarity. He continued his solitary vigil, his eyes scanning the dense canopy, forever watchful. Years later, the ancient stone circle in Blackwood Pines, now deserted and overgrown, still held a lingering, unnatural chill. On a moss-covered stone, a single black feather lay undisturbed. And beneath the surface, a faint, almost imperceptible hum sometimes emanated from the earth itself, a low thrumming that vibrated through the forest floor. It was a sound that only those who knew the true history of Blackwood Pines could discern, a sound that suggested the gateway was merely dormant, waiting. The evil was never fully expelled from the woods. It simply retreated into the deeper shadows, leaving behind unanswered questions, an enduring legacy of horror, and the chilling possibility that the offering might one day be resumed. The pines still whispered, and sometimes, if you listened closely enough, you could almost hear the faint chanting of the veiled order on the wind.